Good morning, everybody, or well, late afternoon. This is Bill with YouBeYou.Live. I'm here today with Chris Pinadella and Dave Farrick. The reason why we created YouBeYou.Live is because we understand that there are some topics that we agree on, there's some topics that we disagree on, but we should still be able to be friends and have a decent, respectable conversation about who we are, what we believe. And at the end of the day, you be you, and we can still be friends. And I may agree with you, I may not agree with you, but I want to hear your side of it. I don't want to surround myself with a bunch of people that think like me, because that's not how you learn. That's not how you learn. So I am going to start with Chris and my partner on the show. This is actually the Bill and Greg show, if you guys don't know. He's running a little bit late, and Greg has committed to one show a month, and I've been doing them weekly, because one thing that Keith Keller told me was consistency. I heard that in his last episode. So Chris, you and I actually met on one of Keith Keller's podcasts. We don't really know each other. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so we met on Keith Keller's podcast, but I would say we had definitely we bounced ideas off one another and seemed to resonate a little bit. So we decided to explore it further and kind of end communication from that point on, just so we could have a real conversation like this live on the air. So who I am, I'm originally from northern New Jersey. I grew up in a small town called Pequannock, New Jersey, and I've always loved the Jersey Shore. I grew up in and around the Jersey Shore as a kid. My family always vacationed down here, and recently my family moved down here. I relocated with my mother and father. While I was down here, my father got sick, so I stayed with them for a little while longer. I have since moved out. I'm in medical technology. I work for a company called BioFrontera in photodynamic therapy. Not allowed to talk about that on air. It's FDA violation stuff, so I won't talk about that. But they're a great company. The other thing I will say is I founded 3 companies. 2 are called Sales Pulse Medical Trends. One is a C Corp nonprofit, and the other is a nonprofit LLC that is aimed at trying to fix healthcare on a global scale. So that's me, and that's who I am.
Fantastic. And then we have my good friend, Dave. Dave, we lost you.
Yeah, and I was sorry about that. I was having a hard time with my camera settings, and so just decided to put on the blur. You'll have to forgive me. I'm in my bedroom right now, and the last thing you guys want to see is my bed.
You know what? But the whole point of this is just be who you are. I'm going to give a quick backstory. I post a lot, and Dave sometimes agrees with what I say, and sometimes he doesn't. And then sometimes, and I think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do it. Sometimes I've witnessed, Chris Berryman, by the way, I sent you a link to your LinkedIn message that can allow you to join the call. But I've witnessed where Dave has gotten like beat up. I mean, people we're so divided. And eventually what I end up doing is going to Dave on the side and say, in private message, are you okay? Because he's going to stand his ground. He is going to say what he has to say. And, he is big in his faith, and he's a good guy. And I said, let's join the call. So that's Dave. Dave, did you already tell us about yourself?
I don't think I did, but if you want me to, I can.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so sounds like I got an East Coast partner over here. I'm actually from Brooklyn, New York. You probably don't hear it in the accent, but sometimes I'll speak very, very quickly, and that's when people will kind of pick up on where I'm from. I left in 1986 after the Mets won the World Series and figured there's nothing else for me to do in New York, so I might as well venture out and join the military. Did that for 10 years. Ended up in California. Got out, and being in the military opened up a lot of doors for me. So I was able to take a lot of my experience in both early computing in the 80s and my electronics degree, and just kind of meld into a field of enjoying both of those. So right now I work for a global company called Diebold Nixdorf. We manufacture and service ATM equipment and a lot of other things. We do electronic security, we do retail, and it's a pretty huge global market. So I'm currently the senior operations manager for what we call managed services, where we manage all of the customers' IT infrastructure that they don't want to deal with in the financial technology market. And so it's been a very rewarding career. I've been there 18 years. I've learned a lot, and I know a lot about a little.
A lot about a little. So
Excuse me,
18 years.
I know a little about a lot.
A little about, okay. All right. So we're still waiting for Greg to jump on. He just told me he's on his way. Do you guys have anything that you find interesting? Because there's so much going on in the world. Chris,
Yeah, I think I find
you said you had a
something.
great week. Go ahead.
I think I have something really interesting to talk about. So I am in talks, and I have an agreement. Whatever an MOA is. I forget what the actual acronym is, with a company called Stars Technologies to develop their hydrogen microgrid system. Now that I've become a board member with the Seattle Microgrid Consortium, and so using technology developed at PNNL in conjunction with NASA, we have an opportunity, I think, to take veterans here in America and put them to work constructing hydrogen at scale here in America, and then scaling that globally, and making it an initiative to maintain equipment like this around the world, so we can take the military industrial complex and make it a military building complex and engineer projects for the future. Rather than compete, we can collaborate. So I think it would be a smart idea to start working here in America on doing some stuff with some of that tech here, and I think I've got the connections and the people in place, and with someone like you here on stage to help me out, and you here to help me out on stage, I think this is something we can bring to fruition.
So you're a keynote speaker.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So, how did you get involved with? It's not Starlink. It's
Stars hydrogen technology.
Got it. How did you get involved with that?
So I guess I'm not really 100% sure how the whole journey got here. So I started out with a newsletter that turned into me also writing a Medium blog. And somewhere along the line, I believe somebody found an article that I wrote on a new form of leadership that the world needs as we approach the technological revolution that we're experiencing. And ever since I wrote that article, a lot of people have been reaching out to me through different channels. And gentleman by the name of Mike reached out to me and invited me to, after reading, I guess, several of my articles, knew I was a sales guy, said, maybe we need here at IEEE is a sales guy. And so
Nice.
He was quite astute in his assessment, and he brought me to speak at a keynote that I believe that you have the link to. So, but my phone number's in there, so I guess I'm gonna have to change my phone number. But
I didn't send it out because
Yeah.
it was only a message, and it was cut off. I kind of got.
Whatever. I mean, it's out there. I took this whole project public in the first place because I want to make it happen. So I don't care if I have to change my phone number. It's not the end of the world, right? But my point is, so I got invited to do a conference just like this, to speak to the IEEE. I couldn't see how many people were in attendance or who were in attendance. I were told some of the world's largest technology organizations would be at least witnessing it. So I just delivered a message that I thought was what they needed to hear about the future, rather than present on medical technology. I sort of got into it. I pointed at my wrist and talked about the potential of these things, and then they invited me to speak out in Hawaii, where I gave the full presentation.
What's on your wrist?
An iWatch.
Okay.
Apple Watch.
Okay. All right.
And basically what I was talking about is the potential for these and smartphones to be able to remote monitor people as they navigate away from climate change, or potentially as they cross the border, to not overcrowd our hospital systems. So this way our hospital systems aren't overloaded, and we can use drones, and basically Doctors Without Borders drop some stuff off and triage these people before they get here. Because one of the biggest problems we have is antimicrobial resistance. And if we have germs spreading uncontrollably with climate change and wildfires raging. People are going to get sick and pestilence is going to spread. So then we're going to have all these people who think biblical prophecies are real, losing their minds, saying that these are end times, and then everybody's just going to say, not realize that these are historical patterns that have repeated over and over and over again. Everybody's going to scream end times, and then we're going to go to war, which is a terrible idea. So I think we
So
should just build stuff.
I agree. I know Dave wants to chime in here. Give me a second, Dave.
I'm just listening.
And welcome, Chris.
Yeah.
So what do you think about, so we're going to go into today, right? So with all that you said, what do you think about us, meaning the collective us in America, disconnecting from the World Health Organization and isolating ourselves from our allies and not getting, you do realize we just got put on a list that is the same as Iran, as I forget what it's called. Dave, do you know what it's called?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, it basically saying that we're
enemies of the world is what they're saying.
Yes. So you talked about, people thinking this is going to be the end of the world, and understanding how, health and well-being are kind of interconnected. So I'm disturbed by us disconnecting.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I am very concerned about us disconnecting, because that is the whole reason why we kept peace after World War II, is we didn't disconnect. We learned the lessons of isolation from previous attempts at going isolationist. We've learned those lessons before. It was after World War I, and it resulted in World War II, which was nuclear, and we can't afford to go nuclear again. That
Right.
won't work well, so we need to avert that at all costs. What is the quote? I do not know what weapons World War III will be fought with, but I know that World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
I'd like to welcome Chris. Hi, Chris.
Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. Glad to be here with you guys today on Super Sunday, and yet it's raining here in Florida, so I'm so humbled and honored to probably maybe pull a little sunshine on the day today, and can't wait for this great and engaging conversation, gentlemen.
Well, what part of Florida?
I'm smack dab in the middle of the state. I'm 45 minutes to Orlando, 45 minutes to Tampa. So I'm literally right in the smack dab in the middle of the state. So I can go to the Space Coast in less than an hour, go to the beach in less than an hour. So I'm right smack dab in the middle. I'm actually in the spring training home of the Lake, not the Lakeland Tigers, but the Detroit Tigers. So right now, that's where I live.
Okay. I have Greg. Hey, Greg.
Greg, I think
Can you hear me?
Hello, everybody. How are you today?
Hey, Greg.
So Greg is, as I said earlier, this is the Bill and Greg show. And Greg basically and I partnered up to kind of come up with this conscious idea. Greg, how's your day going today?
Lots of stuff in transition right now, so lots of exciting things on the horizon for yours truly.
Okay, good. Dave, let's talk to you.
Sure.
So you're a vet. What are your thoughts about two things? One of the what Chris just said about helping vets, and then are we going in the direction that you fought for?
Ooh, good question. So first thing, I really appreciate anybody that kind of caters to veterans. I often think it's overlooked. I don't know if anybody's looking into this new movement about ripping the paper ceiling, but most of the people that join the military do not have college degrees unless they're officers, right? So you have all these enlisted guys that join the military to gain some kind of experience that's going to benefit themselves and hopefully benefit, when they get out. And I always use myself as kind of a reference to that. When I joined the military, I dropped out of college because I was just getting bored and just getting into too much trouble. So I needed some discipline, and I surely found it in the 10 years that I did in the military. But here's the rub. I put my nose to the grind, and I learned a really good trade. I became an avionics technician, and I often joke and brag that I worked on $40 million weapon delivery systems. We called them the F-18 fighter at the time, but I was a college dropout fixing these fighter jets that pilots were using to go and do some amazing things. So when I did that for 10 years and I got out of the military and I couldn't even get anybody at any of the top airlines or even the smaller airlines to hire me because I didn't at the time have an AMP license or some other certification that they thought was necessary, I started to realize then that I don't think they understand what the military is providing to a lot of these young men and women that are capable of just absorbing learning without the decorum or the stringent education that comes from a college. I mean, I eventually got my degree, but I was far and beyond doing a lot of things that most college graduates were doing at the time. So first of all, kudos. Thank you for doing it. I am blessed to be in a position sometimes when I hire people, and I will tell you, I right, wrong, or indifferent, I lean towards those that have military experience because I know they come with the ethics. I know they come with the decorum. I also know that they understand chain of command. That's one of the things I struggled with the most when I joined or when I came back in the civilian world was the lack of a chain of command. There's too many gray areas where there's not structure. There's nobody that knows how to make decisions. I mean, even if I wasn't in charge in the military, I could be called what you would refer to as an on-scene leader, meaning I'm taking charge of this situation because nobody else knows what the hell's going on. So anyway, that's that. As regards to our global situation, if you were to ask me this 10 years ago, I'm going to admit I was ate up. I was like, "Go America!" I was probably one of the biggest nationalists you probably would ever meet. I was just everything pro-America. I wore everything pro-America attire, and I didn't make many friends because I do have a wide variety of friends, and I started realizing that, listen, I got to put aside my rhetoric of this pro-America and understand that there's real problems in the world. And it wasn't until I came back to my faith 10 years ago that I started realizing you get more done when you have the power of influence and the power of connection with people. Until you have a connection with people and you understand why other people feel the way they do, then you're going to be open to suggestive ideas. Okay, maybe everything's not unicorns and rainbows. Maybe everything needs a little bit more understanding and empathy towards others and how they feel and how we can somehow meet in the middle. So when it comes to a lot of the issues going on, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I've kind of done this disengagement the last 3 years. Short story, I keep it quick. I lost my brother, my mother, and my father in less than a year, 2 of them in tragic ways. And I had kind of a reset on what was important in my life. So I've kind of pulled away a lot from the rhetoric that is our politics, the rhetoric that is some of the Christian messaging out there that I don't align with, and then just some of the other things. So I know I'm not really answering your question except for saying I'm still seeking, and I'm hopeful, and I'm optimistic, and I'm doing my part within my city and my neighbors to hopefully let that flourish into fruit that propagates to bigger things.
That's really good. And I want to kind of hit a point there. You said your Christian faith, points in your Christian faith that you do not align with.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to make this statement. I grew up Catholic in the Catholic Church.
Same.
My grandfather was a Methodist preacher. My mom has her own church. And I went to Troy Gramling's church up until about 10 years ago. And Troy Gramling, it comes on right behind Joel Osteen. I found myself with the current, rhetoric that I'm hearing from certain paths in Christianity that it was excluding people, and I couldn't, I just couldn't understand it, because in my life, in what I hear is, I'm not here to judge anybody. And my faith in the Bible should not be used as a shield. So I kind of stepped back, and I said, you know, I still believe, but I need to have my own relationship with God.
Bingo. You nailed it.
And
Good. I'm sorry. Finish.
no. That's really it. And so, go ahead, Dave.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't know if you were done or not. It's hard to tell with the lag sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of was, and then I'm kind of ADHD, so then I was like,
Oh, I'm
but
sorry.
then this.
I didn't
So
mean to
no. Go ahead.
No, listen. I was going to agree with you. So I was born and raised a Catholic as well, and I'm not going to get into great details except for mentioning I'm currently in a lawsuit with the Diocese of Brooklyn over events that happened in the early '80s. You can read the tea leaves as you want.
Yeah.
But I had a very bad experience, which forced me to not forced me, but I chose to leave my faith because I had a real issue. And I used to joke, I don't have a problem with God. I have a problem with his management team. Right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So there was a lot of rhetoric. I mean, they used to beat the love of God into you back in the day, you know, when I went to school in the late 70s, where they physically actually hit you. So no, that didn't teach me the love of God. It wasn't until later on in life, like I said, about 10 years ago, I became a born again Christian. And you nailed it. It's a personal relationship. And I think one of the things that I've found that you've experienced and I've experienced, and you just have to find that right place, is the weaponization of Christian theology. Giving people that holier than thou and that rhetoric of hypocrisy that exists. Even within my church, I still see it exist. But I've always led my life in the last 10 years by the two greatest commandments. I love my God and I love my neighbor. Doesn't matter if you're gay, doesn't matter what your skin color is, your education, none of that stuff. I'm not here to judge. There's one person that's going to judge. I have personal opinions on things, but I have a wide spectrum of friends just because of the environment I was brought up in New York. It was very eclectic.
Yeah. A lot of times when I'm posting, you know, I usually will post about God and the universe because I want to include everybody. Because everybody, not everybody, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I believe there is a higher power. And I want to include everybody's faith and everybody's mindset, and consider that I am a work in progress and I'm still on my journey for a better me. So I just want to be respectful of everyone.
That's fine.
Greg?
You can't say anything to me that's gonna hurt me. I was in the military for 10 years, remember.
Right. Gregory.
Well, I also grew up in the Catholic Church. I was an altar boy, received communion, was baptized in that faith. Somewhere in my tweens, the church that my family was attending at the time was in a multicultural congregation. So they had services in English and Spanish and other languages. And at the time, becoming more aware of the realities of society, I had my eyes open that the people who claim to be the most devout, right, and the most God-loving did not practice that outside of the building, right?
Right.
So it was very disillusioned. They call them like Christians or Catholics, whatever. So my family stopped attending, much like what you'd said, like had a more direct and one-on-one relationship. Me personally, as I got older and entered college, I started exploring a lot of spirituality and ideology. So I became a student of multiple religions. just understanding like the different viewpoints and different origins of people's faith, what the different histories are, practices, and things like that. And so it's kind of have a broader view and understanding of what the different flavors are. And there's plenty of different flavors to go around for sure. But through those studies, like fundamentally, when you distill it down, like the core message is still the same, right? Like conduct yourself as a good person, treat other people the way you want to be treated, do your best to be a good citizen where you're at. And then if you do that, when your time here is passed, you'll be rewarded in the next.
I agree. Greg, do you want to take on the next topic? Chris, are you okay with this conversation?
Yeah, 100%. Doesn't bother me at all. I'm happy to tell you what my faith is or
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I'm the opposite. I mean, I grew up sort of not like an atheist, but agnostic, but I was raised in the Catholic Church. I gave my first communion at 6 years old. I didn't see the point of kind of staying behind the whatever you call it, where you don't see the priest. I wanted to do it face to face because I thought, what's the point of, confession if you're not going to be accountable? So that was my first experience with the church. It was a fine church. It was a good church in the town I grew up in. And then I went to the next town over, and in high school, I had an odd experience that turned me off to the church for a long time. And that was I was a football player at the time, and a lot of my teammates were. And there was this one particular church in our town, at the top of a hill. Anybody watching who knows where I'm from knows the church I'm talking about, but I'm not going to throw them under the bus.
Yeah.
But the long and short of it is they had me parade around at an event with my shirt off and get auctioned off to some person to sit down and have dinner with. And that was not explained to me before I went there. And then they took my shirt and wouldn't give it back to me. And I had to drive home with some very creepy individual. And it turned me off to the church for a very long time ever since. And they chased me for a very long time in terms of trying to get me to come back, and told me that I'd do good things and I'd help so many people and I would drive charity events, which is all stuff that I really wanted to do, but not for them. So, that's always been my thing. I always thought the faiths were beautiful, every single one of them. I actually study them extensively, not just the three major, but I've also studied the history of religions, world religions. And, I just find, it's all about trying to come to this same answer and understanding. And as a scientist myself, the conclusion I've come to is I'm a deist. The universe basically dictates something created it. Whether or not it is actively conscious or watching us, there's something called the watchmaker hypothesis, where maybe God made us and we're like a cell phone that he put down on a table. But for me, the answer is I just don't know, because I'm a scientist. But there seems to be some sort of guiding force for sure.
Yeah, I questioned one time, are the universe and God the same thing?
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Greg?
This universal consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find it interesting. You mentioned, atheism and people that are agnostic. I find that when it comes to discussing religion and particularly the morality, the messages in religion, right? The people who are non-denominational, particularly atheists and agnostics, know the most about the text, right, and the messages in those spiritual books than the people who are being pious and preaching and judgmental about whatever morality issue they're talking about.
Got it.
The guidelines are excellent. The guidelines are excellent in the books. I just think that people bring mistake to the lessons sometimes.
I tend to find that people cherry pick messages for confirmation bias, right? And then they completely ignore the rest of the things that are also there that you should, if you claim to be a practitioner, that you should also abide by, for sure.
So I think this is a great conversation. We're going to dive away from religion for a second.
Mm-hmm.
But before we do, I wanted to say this. I was thinking to myself one day that what if Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad. I don't know the rest. All right. We're all sent down by God, and they were all the same energy. But as they manifested themselves, they manifested in a form that the person that was looking at them would understand and recognize. That's my little theory here.
Alan Watts talks about that in a couple of different lectures about those key religious figures such as Muhammad, Jesus, and Buddha. And in the moments of their consciousness and their universal awakening, how do you articulate that, right, to other people, especially? And then in the moment of the times, like, how does that get documented and transcribed? Right, so it's very easy to not be able to express in the correct words what that phenomenon is and was, and then how does that get retold? What words are being chosen? It's very quickly, very easily can be twisted and distorted into a much different message and meaning than the original experience through those images.
There's a great movie that answers that question.
What? What's the name of it?
It's called Jerome Bixby's The Man from Earth.
Is it actual? Have you heard of it, Dave?
I have not. I was going to actually add to that. It's
Go ahead.
I think one of the things, I think we've all mentioned the word journey. At least I thought I heard it a few times, and it's always a lifelong journey. When I was an agnostic, I had real conversations with a person that I didn't even know if he existed or not. So here I am, kind of yelling at people and or yelling at this higher being and going, does he even exist? And I've had my own life experience where I've come to believe, but that wasn't enough. Just having faith alone is never going to be enough for somebody to understand, the glory that what I feel is God. And so I keep educating myself. I surround myself by different, people's input on stuff, especially within theology and philosophy. And I'm always reading really good books. And I personally like to throw a book out there. I like to read C.S. Lewis, but it's a very difficult read for me. It's very, very highly astute stuff. But there's an author called Timothy Keller, and his book is The Reason for God. And he does it in really, really good bite-sized chunks. And he invokes the words of C.S. Lewis all the time in a way that's digestible to me, so I can understand and then correlate it with the messages that I read out of the Bible. So, I still have a lot of questions. In fact, on LinkedIn today, I think I posted something, I don't know if you saw it, where, it's jokingly asking St. Patrick to define what the Trinity is. And if you watch that video, it was meant to be humorous, but it speaks to how a very complex situation cannot be expressed in a very simplistic way, especially in a human form. We are called to not lean on our own understandings. That doesn't mean we have blind faith, though. So I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Would you spell Timothy's name for me and the last name?
Keller, Keller. And it has a subtitle. It's called The Reason for God, but it's called Belief in an Age of Skepticism. And so even as a Christian, and if Christians don't admit that they have this, they're lying to you. All Christians still have skepticism. All Christians still wonder what the hell's going on. Why does God allow this? Why does God allow that? And there's a lot of answers to it. And I know we're getting ready to go into another subject, but I think my point in this is that the search should never stop. Even if you feel like you've hit a roadblock and you feel like you're turning the other way with your faith, it's okay. I feel my God can take on those big questions, and he can even take on our anger and our distrust and our just passion that he's doing things wrong.
Yeah. And I want to say to you, Dave, the forum here is for you, for us to have a conversation. Sure. So even if we are moving on to a different subject, get your thought out. Make sure that you're
I
heard.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm not. That's not why I was moving on to a different subject, but I find it very interesting to learn from each other.
Well,
Greg?
of all people, you've seen what I post online, and I
Yeah,
try to do it. I try to do it sparingly because the last thing people want, because I used to feel the same way, is religion thrown at you, forced on you, and that's the only thing you talk about.
right.
Am I a Jesus freak? Sure. Am I one of those people that want to throw the Bible in your face? Absolutely not.
Well, I think the Holy Trinity question is a pretty easy one to answer, isn't it?
Not well. I would challenge you to watch that video because it even got me thinking today. Because anyway, I'll just leave it at
I'll
that.
take a
It's
look.
a funny take on it.
Chris, what's the answer?
I would say it's, your relationship with somebody else and God to care for other life.
Okay.
I think, while I agree with you, Chris, I think that, deconstructing the three phases or the three parts of the Trinity is where people have a hard time hanging their head on.
But if it's just two people getting together and then the result is life, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a man and a woman, you could have adoption for people who are children, that don't have parents, it's just about creating families and making sure families and bloodlines continue to exist.
Got it. That's actually a great answer, my friend. And I like this.
Add real quick. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you.
Oh, actually, we're kind of citing some sources and things that we're digesting currently. I recently shared a post where in sharing the video, right, when someone asks me if I'm religious or I go to church, so you can find me listening to these guys. And so they're current theorists in like the quantum science realm. Greg Braden, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and Dr. Bruce Lipton are just doing some mind-blowing research and discovering some theory with that and how it ties into spirituality and ideology. It's pretty amazing stuff.
I have a question about quantum physics and quantum everything. Like, who wants to answer that? Chris?
There you go.
I mean, I'll give my best shot at it. I'm not,
All right.
I study a lot of quantum physics. I don't dive into the math with these people. I mean, I did it in the past. I haven't done the math in a long time, so I'll give my best answers, but I'll give it a shot is what I'll say. I'm not the expert in this stuff. The experts are the experts in this stuff.
I would say like just real basic clip notes, right? We're trying to get a deeper understanding at an atomic, subatomic level of just how things are.
Oh, when you break things down to like the Planck length?
Yeah. So that's just like the depth of what we're trying to understand about everything that we coexist with.
Oh, so there's a great YouTube video that I'll post in the comments after this that'll give a great summary. It's actually on my website as well. It's called The Mystery at the Bottom of Physics. But the long and the short is humans just naturally want to divide everything into smaller and smaller pieces to try to figure out what's at the bottom. When you go down very, very small, like the movie Ant-Man, you get to something called the quantum realm, or you keep going, there's something called the Planck length, which is it's just basically saying it's a really, 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 really tiny measurement, smaller than a pinhead by like a trillionfold. So probably even greater than that, quintillionfold or something. Anyway, you get down there and there's these things called quanta, or like quantum bits essentially, and you can't divide them any further. And a lot of people are now looking at that and saying that, oh, well, that must mean that the universe is like a simulation and yada yada yada. But the point is we can't see past it, so we don't really know. And when you get down that, you can understand that the universe functions as a system,
right?
And that once you exist within that system, there are certain parameters to behavior to the universe. And when we measured back like 13.8 billion years, we took the Hubble's telescope, we pointed it out at the universe, and we measured the cosmic background radiation, which is that stuff you used to see on TV in the 80s when your television wasn't tuned.
Right.
That's the expansion of the universe. So picture like the Big Bang, like God's creation, if you will. Today would still be the day of creation. It's still being created. So when you measure the cosmic background radiation, you could see that it's actually self-organizing. And what seems to be self-organizing it is some sort of measurement or observation. So if you observe, like there's a famous experiment called the double slit experiment, where basically a particle could actually travel back in time and interfere with itself. I'm not going to go into how that happens in great detail here. You can just Google all this stuff. Physicists are very smart. Watch the videos. um, they're even in cartoon form. I'll post the links on my page after the show.
So for me, right?
Well,
Because
this is exactly how I learned it. I learned it from cartoon form, right? Like, so I just
you
wanted
and
to
Greg are in line. I think me and Dave are
Yeah.
gonna like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
I checked out.
The long and the short, there's nothing. It's hard to grasp at first, but you'll see I put up like little things. It's a little hole and a rabbit, and saying follow the rabbit hole, follow the Alice in Wonderland thing.
Okay.
And that is when you start diving into physics and you start figuring out how the universe works, the conclusion is almost inescapable that it's the observation of life transmutating materials over time that gives the universe order. So we're actually shaping the universe with our own decisions or by deciding not to do things. So that whole wish it, want it, will it thing from Family Guy with Brian Griffin, that's real.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually how I got to be on your show right now. I willed my way here.
You willed your way to be on my show?
I willed my
First of
way
all,
to
this is Greg's show.
Well, everybody's show. I willed my way to get to this moment.
Thank you.
Yes.
We appreciate that. I'm gonna let Greg take over for now.
I just wanted to circle back to the previous topic where Dave was talking about his military service. Thank you for that. And then working with current and former military personnel. I would agree that it's a different type of education going through the military service. I have a checkered and multi-layered opinion about the military, how we treat our veterans while they are in service, but a very scathing, not polite opinion about how we treat them after their service is done.
I'm with you.
Yeah, but with that, I will say that the best team that I've ever worked on and the most fun I've ever had was like 80%, 30%. Like,
Was the what?
We're former military personnel, right? The best team I've worked on, the most fun I've ever had on the job. There is a sense of camaraderie and brother and sisterhood. Having been through that experience, I didn't serve myself, but it is obvious, right? And there's a certain understanding that I can see as an outsider. People who have served in the military, not only side by side, but just in the organization as well. And so I always appreciate that level of work ethic and would absolutely, again, I appreciate that too.
Okay.
No, go ahead. Like I saw some other thoughts, but we could.
No, I was going to say, with all that said, what are your thoughts of all the defunding that's going on, and almost defunding without a strategy? So I believe that America needs to save money. All right, so we can all agree with that. But taking a baseball bat to all these departments, there's two things that are concerning. Number one, where's the oversight? And then number two, my life has been feast or famine. It's just like it has been. I've been high, and then 2008, 2009 just knocked everything out. And then I rebuilt it, and then COVID hit. So I understand where some of these services that we're cutting without thinking about it are damaging to our communities. I'm going to give you guys this one little thing that always sticks out in my mind. I was in Dallas, Texas. I was in my convertible BMW. I was wearing my Gucci watch. The top was down, and I was sitting in a parking lot on my cell phone. And this young girl walks up to me and she says, "Excuse me, sir, can I borrow a couple of dollars to get some food?" My top was down because I couldn't afford to get it fixed. I was in the parking lot because they had turned off the lights in my apartment. I was calling for food assistance, and I looked at that girl and said, "There is no difference between you and me at this very, very moment." The only difference was I looked like I had everything going on. So when I think about, and I think that that also shaped my perspective on my finances. And this may or may not make sense, but I make enough, or I made enough to take care of myself. And at a certain point, I wanted to make sure that I can help others. So it is important to me that I have stability, right? All of us want stability, and that I can have a little nest egg. But it's also just as important to me to give back in whatever fashion that I can, whether that's me helping someone get to the next level in their career, whether it's me donating to an organization that helps, get food, um, because it hasn't always been easy. And I told Greg this before. Um, I've made a great career for myself, but I was a teenage runaway at 16 that slept in my car and didn't have a handout or a hand up. So I fought for every single thing that I had to get. And I climbed and I made it. And then I lost it. But the thing about it is when you lose it and you have that drive in you, I made it again. So after I lost it in 2010, it was like 2008, the economy dropped. By 2010, I was like bankrupt. And in 2021, I owned a $26 million company. It closed because of COVID. And then since then, it's been up and down, up and down. And guys, remember, $26 million doesn't mean a $26 million profitable company. It means that's the revenue it's generating. So when COVID hit, and the cash flow kind of stifled, we couldn't, anyway, that's enough about that. I don't know how we got on that topic, but I think it was good. What do you guys think?
I would say, in that vein, when we think about the unhoused population, most people don't realize that about 13%, about 1 in 10 of every unhoused person is a veteran. And that literally breaks my heart. When people talk about how they support the troops and they fly their little yellow ribbon on the back of their truck, wear it on the lapel pin, yet they do all of these things to be aggressive and criminalize being unhoused. Right? The hypocrisy is good. Right? You don't know the person's story that's standing in front of you, and 10% of them are former veterans. So as long as the number of homeless veterans is more than 0, we're not doing enough to support them after their service is done.
And that makes no sense. The way that we treat the veterans and our elderly. I mean,
so you just struck a point with me, if you don't mind me interrupting.
Sure.
I used to work for a government agency after I got out of the military called the Housing Authorities. I think we're all probably familiar with the housing authorities. They're under the Housing and Urban Development. And when I went there with I worked in the IT department. So I went there just not really knowing about what the service did. If I'm being honest, I just needed a job at the time, and it turned into something wonderful. But I was then exposed to because obviously we work with a lot of other social services, and that's when I started really being exposed to who's taking care of who, right? Or whom, I should say. And so to your point, when you mentioned military and elderly, I can tell you that within the housing authorities, we have what we call low-income public housing and Section 8 vouchers. And it used to really irritate the crap out of me because I was doing a lot of data analyst there, that we didn't have vouchers or public housing for elderly and military, because military were usually young, able-bodied people. The elderly, the problem with the elderly, not the problem, but the challenge with the elderly is that it's usually only one person, and the vouchers work in a way that it helps multi-family units more than a single person. My feeling has always been the elderly people have worked all their life. Where is I know they get Social Security, but we should be putting some more focus on the elderly. Military, I agree with, but the elderly, this is why the homeless situation has gotten so bad. And I ended up running what we call a homeless management information system, which was kind of a subdivision of our housing authorities that was funded by HUD on a grant that I submitted. And my eyes were exposed to why we cannot help a lot of people. And speaking for my county alone, where the homeless population was huge, a lot of these social services will not offer their services because people are either mentally ill, right? Or they won't get off the substance abuse that they're on. And there's ways to help with that substance abuse. But when it comes to getting food and getting beds and getting medical and all this other stuff, there's these prerequisites that they must fall into before that service is provided to them. So it was very hard for me to be within the housing authorities and just kind of see the mismanagement. So I know we were diving into the cuts and the slashes. And, I obviously have some opinions on that, but I've always felt, just from my 10-year experience in the housing authorities, that organizations like Housing and Urban Development need to really be examined closely, because our tax dollars are being wasted, and there's reform that has to happen there.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Our tax dollars are being wasted for sure, but not on the things that we're being told that they are, right? And that's the problem, right? And when we have people up at the top right now who are not Americans telling us what we're wasting money on, while they're also at the same time putting all their assets that have any sort of value are connected to Chinese and Russian influence, we need to take a careful look at who that person is who's auditing not just what we're spending, which, look, we should take a look at that for sure. There's always government fat, but what are we looking at, and why? And why are we looking at people's personal tax returns? Why are all of our data? Why does one person have access to every single person's cell phone? Why can he turn off satellites at will over countries in war zones? Why is that happening? Why is one man in the Oval, who's not the president of the United States, have that much power? And that's dangerous. That's the most dangerous man in the world right there.
I 100% agree with that. And I was going to say, when we're talking about waste and we're talking about social services, let's say welfare, okay, so that's a name that we can all remember. Musk is getting $8 billion a year from the United States to subsidize his companies. $8 billion. So if we're going to cut, why don't we cut there?
But yeah, the richest man on the planet does not need handouts from the United States government.
But he's getting them.
Correct.
He's getting them. And I'm going to get kind of mad for a second. We bailed out the banks in 2010. Bailed them out because they were too big to fail. And they foreclosed on my house. So my tax dollars bailed out JP Morgan Chase, and then JP Morgan, because they couldn't afford to pay their bills, right? And then JP Morgan Chase took my house. So how does that make sense?
Capitalists are very good at privatizing their profits and socializing their losses. They're very good at that for several decades.
Kind of runs like an oligarchy, doesn't it?
Kind of does. I wanted to do a shout out to Danielle Staley. My sister from another mister, Shantae Morgan, asked a very interesting question. I don't know how to answer it because I happen to not be a Republican. Does anyone want to answer that question?
I am a Republican, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
So what is the question? Bill described
It's,
pulling him up by the bootstraps. So how is your ability to recover any different than what Trump and the Republicans argue? I will let him answer the question. It's directed at him.
well, thanks a lot. Well, I don't know exactly what the Republicans are arguing. I know that what they're saying is they're doing away with social services or social assistance or trying to remove Medicare and Medicaid.
Oh,
All that stuff. My ability to pull myself up from my bootstraps, my bootstraps is that I always knew that I was better than where I was. And
well,
my family, my not I don't want to say anything negative about my immediate family, but the people that I was around were all doctors, lawyers, CEOs, COOs. So I had that in my mind of what I wanted to aspire to be. Now, of this group, I'm the Trevor Noah of the group. All right. So let's be clear about that. So I didn't want to have an average life, but I didn't want to have an average life at 8 years old. I was that kid at 8 years old that wanted to go to school in a suit and a briefcase. It's like so weird. But I had big dreams, and I had a few people in my life that said, "You're better than where you're at." And because they spoke that into me, I was able to grab onto it and use that as stepping stones throughout my career. And because of that, when I'm working with someone, and I think Dave has, I think Dave's seen some of my and Greg of my posts. I'm always talking about lifting someone else up, about knowing that you manifest through your thoughts and through your mind and through your faith. And recently, I've had to stop talking about my situation because I realized that my speech that was coming out, I'm looking for a job, Chris. My speech, and it's been 2 years. So the speech that was coming out was not what I wanted to manifest. It was about what happened yesterday. And so now I'm talking more about what's moving forward. And if you read through my articles, most of the time I'm talking to myself. Most of the time I'm writing something to me, but sharing it with the public because I feel like if I'm going through it right now, somebody else might be going through it as well. I don't know if that answered any of the questions.
Well, I will respond to that question more directly. So during Trump's initial campaign run back in 2015, when he coined the phrase "the Make America Great Again" and then used that as platform for his administration or his ideology, someone had specifically asked him, since he was the one that created the slogan, he was the one that pushed the concept of making America great again. They directly asked him, well, when was the time in America that was great that you want to return to? His answer, which you can look up, was the period post-World War II, when America was in a great, booming, prosperous time. But what they failed to follow up on, and I encourage everyone to go look, is at the time, for almost 2 decades after that, we had entirely Democratic administrations, save for one, who was a Republican, who was a World War II hero, right? All of these socialist policies that were enacted prior to World War II, through Teddy Roosevelt and others, that built America, right? After World War II, after we destroyed all of our competition, both in Europe and parts of Asia at the time, right? There was no one left to compete with America, to build anything, to sell anything. And then we also controlled their governments to some extent or another. So we had pretty much a monopoly on the global market for almost 2 decades. And then domestically, we had overwhelming majority socialist policies before the war and then after. And we talk about the tax rate on the top earners, the top 5% earners. The tax rate, income tax rate, was 90 to 94%. 90 to 94%. That's where a bulk of the revenue is coming from, to then be able to do these programs, to build America, to build the infrastructure, to provide services to Americans, right? For 20 years. That's why it was so great. And for people to claim to be MAGA Republicans to have disdain and hatred for socialism and socialist policies, but yet claim to want to go back to a time in America when it was the most socialist we have ever been, right? It's hypocritical. And so when we talk about people trying to overcome extreme poverty and challenges that social services would be able to address and help alleviate, if not resolve, that's where the hypocrisy comes from Trump and his administration. They're not trying to do any of that. They're trying to dismantle all of the social services. They're trying to dismantle all of the infrastructure. They're trying to remove and lower the tax rate for top earners. So all of that is completely hypocritical to the message that they sold to the people who voted.
Chris?
Yep. No, I agreed with everything that Greg just said, 10,000%. And it's, look.
As a Republican.
Yeah, no,
Right.
look. So let me back up to that comment to clarify. I am what a Republican used to be, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I'd say I kind of distanced myself from the party and became more of an independent and voted for Democrats largely in national elections, but not necessarily in local or state elections.
Right.
As the Tea Party began to grow, the Tea Party was when things started to fracture for me, where it got a little too weird with the surveillance of everything after 9/11. So there was just, the Patriot Act. I saw where it was going. Then I saw what happened with algorithms and social media, and I went, okay, Big Brother's here, and this is bad. And so I've always known how dangerous social media and algorithms are, how dangerous communication systems are. They are nothing more than a system of the control of the flow of information. So, basically, to back up to what Greg is saying, our role here on this stage is to communicate to everybody out there that when America was at its best, when we were cultivating both the world's greatest artists and the world's greatest economy and building great, beautiful, ginormous buildings and expanding at ungodly rates and sending real rockets, beautiful, like actually going to the moon and doing real important things, real science work, stuff that we should get back to doing instead of skipping and going straight to Mars, which makes no sense. If we would start doing that stuff again, this country would be great again. But we just need to fix a few of the things that we messed up along the way, like how we district certain areas, how we treat certain people, and because honestly, at the end of the day, I know a lot of people get upset with DEI, but DEI, what you really need to focus on, it's about diversity of thought, because if you could solve a problem with different cultural perspectives, it's just I learned at MIT under Professor Thomas Malone. It's called a supermind, everyone. So if you come at it from different angles, it is really simple. You fix problems quicker. Diversity is a good thing, especially when it comes to creative brains.
It's and also I think what we're doing right now is what makes America great.
Right.
Just coming together and having a conversation. Now I know that Dave got beat up over DEI. I made a DEI post. I made a DEI post, and I'm always posting something controversial. And Dave's response, I know specifically, was I at first I was against it, but then I looked at my faith and decided to go with it. I think that's what you said. But go ahead, Dave. What's your perspective?
No, it's a very complex situation. And to your point, the fact that we have several different people on here and people watching and giving at least the opportunity to kind of hear us out. Nobody's ever going to agree with everything you feel. We all have our different upbringings that kind of mold how we feel the way we are. You know, I think one of the things that I struggle with the most, and first, let me touch on that post you made. What I was trying to do and failed miserably, although I did get a lot of positive feedback from other people in my inbox, was I was trying to I always like to look at a situation and go, how is that biblical? How is that biblical? And what I was trying to refer to at the time was DEI from a perspective of the Bible. You know, there used to be diversity, equity, and inclusion all spread out through the Bible and the messaging from especially Jesus. And so all I did was point to an article that I wrote on it. It's still there. I didn't take it down. If anybody's ever interested in looking at it, they can and see if they agree or disagree. But unfortunately, when you're on social media, things can spiral out of control really, really quick. People are so passionate, and there's keyboard warriors, and I used to be one, so I know what a keyboard warrior is. But it's exhausting to try to answer every single person's question. And I know when to bow out. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have the ability to argue or debate my position on a certain situation, but all I'm going to do is sour the situation more. And my feelings on that is I'm not trying to sour the situation. I think we can always try to get to a point where we go, listen, we can agree to disagree. And I hate when people say that, but there has some truth behind that.
That's the whole point of this.
I didn't want to keep stirring the pot. To me, LinkedIn is not the place to have those discussions because time, availability, limitations in your responses. And I'm a huge believer in, 80% of effective communication is body language and tone, right? And without the body language and tone, you're just another talking head. And people are going to stick to their feelings. They're going to stick to their viewpoints, and they're going to battle those viewpoints endlessly. So my whole feeling on that was that one I gracefully bowed out of. I still have some feelings on it. And I touched on a little bit of it earlier. A lot of people don't know this, and I'm gonna tread into this very cautiously because I don't want to do the poor me thing. But I get a little irritated, and I'm not using this word to trigger it, but when we start talking about privilege, yes, I do believe privilege exists. And usually somebody looks at me, 50-year-old white guy, and I can tell you right now, I was a minority growing up my entire life. I was like one of the only white guys in my high school. I never dated a white girl. I always dated out of my race, and I got beat up for it. I had people coming after me because I was dating Hispanic, I was dating Black, I was dating Asian. And so those carry with me into my life saying, listen, racism exists both ways. I know more groups other than others probably feel the impact a hell of a lot more. I recognize that. I effing hate racism. I almost cussed there. I hate racism with a passion. But I've also lived the side of racism, and I think that's what influences my passion about the subject on why people cannot just talk to each other, disagree. I don't know. It's really hard to explain. Our DNA is just phenomenal in our inabilities to listen to somebody else.
Without wanting to respond, I mean, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I have to respond because there's so much I want to hit on very quickly, just in succession and points. So first of all, we can't leave out the far left. They're out of their mind too, right? We got to realize that social media is largely influenced by foreign powers that are putting out memes that are designed to make us hate one another. We don't actually hate one another at all. That's just stuff that China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran are putting out, and then we sit there and we look at it, and all of a sudden we forget that we're able to have these conversations and we become angry warriors, and we forget that most Americans really do like each other. And guess what? We also really like Europeans, and we really like, a lot of other stuff around the world, and all of a sudden now everybody's sitting there looking at us going, why is everybody so mad at us? Well, it's because we got some doofuses in charge who are pointing weapons at the rest of the world. So let's stop doing that.
Hey, Chris, real quick, you mentioned the social algorithm earlier, and I've read a lot of books on this as well. I do think, and I hate even plugging this, but I watched it and I thought it was good for maybe teenagers and kids, was that movie, The Social Dilemma. And it speaks to the algorithms. They have people from Facebook, they have, coders and designers from Facebook and other social networks. And it really talks what Chris is talking about. We are being targeted. The algorithm is targeting us on purpose to be controversial, to hate our neighbor.
Right.
Yeah, down to your zip code, where it knows exactly where you live. And if you're in a swing state, swing county, swing district, Mr. Musk can sit there and target Twitter directly at you and say, look, I want to really piss off this, let's just say Monmouth County in New Jersey. I want to piss off Monmouth County in New Jersey. He could fire out everything on Twitter he wants and piss off all of the area you're in. So all of a sudden, why everybody's angry at each other? It's that guy. So let's just call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
And now
absolutely.
Zuckerberg's doing the same thing. He took the leashes off the reins, so now Meta and Instagram, they're turning it into Rumble, which is just a place where you go and fight. Guys, it is toxic for your kids. And by the way, your kids are growing up looking at this stuff, and they got to realize when they're little and impressionable and young, this is what they learned.
They're sponges.
So they're sponges, and this is how your kids are learning. You want to know why there's school shootings? That's why.
Right. I want to give this credit to Dave. Dave, your comments on the DEI post, man, it shot my impressions up.
Well, good for you.
It was one of my most successful. I think I got like 10,000.
You could have got it monetized.
Because like everyone just like jumped on you. And it was one of those times where I went behind the scenes and said, Dave, are you okay? And he's like, yeah,
I appreciate you reaching out to me. But again, I 10 years in the military, 9 years in Catholic school. I got thick skin.
Got you.
All my high school buddies are military. I'm literally talking to them behind the scenes right now, trying to get this company set up. This is just the way to do it. Let's just put vets back to work in a good way, and let's build the way America used to build. And you guys, like you said, what did you say when you first came on the show? You're working on $50 million weapon system stuff that nobody else is trained to do. We're trying to figure out hydrogen technology and do it at scale. We need engineers. We need people who are smart. We need people who can figure this stuff out. If there's a problem with like a cooling system or a coupling system, and how we can turn this stuff into a gas station of the future, where we could not worry about making profits off of the hydrogen itself. We can make the company, since it's a nonprofit, can make profits off of other technology and then reinvest itself into other R&D for good stuff. So let's just make a self-sustaining, awesome organization with veterans here in America, and then try to model it around the world. See if the idea spreads.
Exactly.
By the way, William, your impressions went up and my profile views went up too.
Did they?
Yes.
Yeah,
By
the way, if this is real, you're all hired.
I think
it's after Greg and I's first episode, and I showed Greg this, my impressions went up 400,000, not percent, up to 400,000 overnight within like an hour and a half. And so
that'd be nice to have those numbers.
Because you need to still stir the crap.
Yeah. So I'm going to be totally transparent. So to make sure that the YouTube channel is working, I put it on my television. And so I have this big, like 80-inch television, and I'm seeing us, and it looks fantastic. We look different on there than we do on this little box that we're looking at right now. So that's why all of a sudden my mind shifted. I'm like, squirrel. Greg,
I
take
just,
over.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I think it's delicious that people are dead naming Twitter, like Elon dead names his kids. That's just delicious to me.
That they're leaving Twitter?
No, people dead name Twitter like Musk dead names his kid. That is
Oh.
that's delicious to me.
Hey, anything to internet burn that guy because he thinks he's the king of internet burns. Keep it up. Have fun. Pour it on. If there's anybody who deserves it, it's Elon.
What
Sure.
do you? So I get a lot of people that are 100% upset that Tesla stocks are down, and I'm going to be transparent with you guys because that's what we do. My daughter just bought a new Tesla, and my ex-mother-in-law, but it was because the leases were so cheap. But I don't support it.
We just need to reprogram them and then we can fix them.
Reprogram what? The cars?
Yeah, make sure
Or my
that they're not
children?
connected. No, make sure that the cars aren't connected to Starlink so they can't be shut off like that movie. And
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
that's the plan. That was a warning from Obama. He was trying to tell us what the plan was. So
Yeah.
we
Do you
should
think
pay
so?
attention. Yeah, of course. They interviewed him behind the scenes. They said that and the movie Civil War 2024 were both warnings that were presented to the Obama administration as to what was coming.
And that's interesting because all of our planes are falling out of the sky.
Yes. I wonder why. Do not fly
And,
right now. If you are an important person, when I go to New Orleans, I will not be flying there.
you know, they say travel is down right now, like 100, like, I don't know how much, by what percentage. But do you think Tesla's going to survive? Do you think they're going to kick them out?
I
Because,
think they have to get rid of them if they want to survive as a company. Yeah.
and then Starlink has had,
They'll get a bailout. They'll get a bailout before that happens.
by who?
By Trump.
Dave?
No, I think the name Tesla will survive regardless of who's in charge of it. I don't think something's going to go away. But you touched on something that I used to feel very passionately about, which was the power of boycott.
Yeah.
I used to believe in the power of boycott, but then I started realizing if I boycotted every single thing I disagreed with, I probably wouldn't have this shirt, I wouldn't have this hat, this watch, my computer. When you start peeling back the onion and you see what all of these companies, who they're in bed with and where finance is coming in and where finance is being shared with, it's very hard to make these ethical decisions on the power of the boycott.
Yeah, but you could just spin off alternate organizations that model what I do and do the same thing somewhere else. You just have all these startups that can just start doing it this way.
Right.
I decided this argument. Okay.
I just finished a week of posts talking about how we live our values, particularly in the workplace, right? And how do we align our personal values with our professional values and the organizations that we work with. Now, the power of boycott is incredible and should be leveraged in the message and the cause rights. With that, with Musk in particular, I've made the comment several times. He tries to posture himself, and he certainly believes that he is Nikola Tesla, but in actual reality, 1,000% he is Thomas Edison.
And I'm not smart enough to understand the difference.
So Nikola Tesla worked for Thomas Edison.
Okay.
Particularly the last part of his life where he was doing all that experiments and research and things like that. Thomas Edison, very much smart guy, smart engineers, right? But he, in a very similar vein, found other smart people that were doing better and more important work than he was, bought them, silenced them, and then slapped his name on it and sold it to people as his brand.
Got it.
It's actually highly insulting to me as somebody who's a tremendous fan of Nikola Tesla, who modeled a lot of what I do after him. I'm, to watch a man like Elon Musk try to pretend to be a true student of him. He is Edison all day long. Edison is the guy who had to he basically killed an elephant with Tesla's power to prove that his was better, even though it wasn't. So you're talking a ruthless type of individual that will result to theatrics, uh, and have little regard for life. And the one thing that I cannot stand about Elon Musk, the way he says about his companies, he says and you can look this up. He thinks empathy is the number one
Yes.
problem with any company. And I'm saying no, it's the number one strength of every company, and that's what made America great in the first place. Is we used to take care of people with unions, and we used to take care of our veterans, and we established Social Security. We didn't figure out ways to try. We had pensions. Companies took care of people. What's wrong with this? Like, and why? What? By the way, let's not get into how digital currency is just his invention or other people's inventions to take American dollars and siphon them overseas. All the largest wallets are owned by foreign governments. That's American money just getting siphoned overseas. If you're part of cryptocurrency, you are funding our enemies to give us more digital information to then have us fight with one another. That's how they destabilize our nation. They have us hate one another over the arguments they're manufacturing with our technology, with their technology, and then they say they're the solution. Sign up, subscription.
Little fun fact about Tesla and Edison. So Edison invented DC, direct current, and Tesla focused on alternating current, right? And when people think about DC, they think about batteries, right? But Tesla was an AC guy. So when you look at the Tesla engine, it's actually batteries, which is really DC when Tesla was AC. Anyway,
Right.
little quandary.
It's interesting. So I don't know anything that I don't understand anything that you just said.
A DC is a battery and your AC is the wall outlet.
Okay. All right. All right.
So basically, direct current, you power force electrons over a cable, or alternating current, you just alternate which way it goes, and then the power is constantly on. It's a much more efficient system of power transfer.
Okay. All right. I believe in just being straightforward so that I learn. You know, all of us sit there and we act like, oh, yeah, that made a lot of sense. So I'm like, okay, what? Now, the wallet outlet versus the battery, I get it. It's interesting about the power of the boycott. Again, my daughter with the Tesla, she also said, there's no way I'm boycotting Target. Now, she has a 2-year-old. And there's just a lot that goes into that. So I kind of understand, but to say I don't have the time. I mean, go order it from somebody or get it directly. I don't know, but she refuses to give up Target, and she brought a Tesla.
You're gonna order it from Bezos and Amazon?
That's what she said. That's exactly what she said. She was like, "So I can't go to Target. I can't go to Amazon.
Exactly
I'm like, go to Costco."
Exactly my point.
I'm like, go to Costco. She's like, it's too far away.
So we have some really, really good old ideas that we used to use, right after World War II. If we're going to make America great again, let's bring back victory gardens, like, hey, we'll just start gardening again. We'll bring back real food. One of the bigger problems that we have is, during the Industrial Revolution, to sustain it, one of the things we did was we industrialized food production as well. And so we're kind of just trying to figure out how to get off the Industrial Revolution, and a lot of companies are still profiting off of it. Well, AI is the solution to get off the Industrial Revolution. We can do a complete digital revolution, and we could sit there and we can use AI to actually enhance agriculture as well. So we could monitor the ground, monitor the soil. We can use some ancient techniques that actually recapture water and start putting nutrients back into the ground, so we don't have to worry about soil losing its potency year after year. And if we just let animals go free range instead of, pumping them full of chemicals that is giving us cancer, there's a lot of illness that we could fix too at the same time. So we can get all the chemicals out of food pretty quickly. It wouldn't take that long. And by the way, you are what you eat is incredibly true. What you eat actually transmutates within your body and becomes the building blocks of your body. So you really don't want it to be the artificial chemical stuff.
Thank you very much, Chris. So I can turn a salad into a disgusting thing. I fry everything. I love fried food. I will take a piece of lettuce and say, "What does it taste like if I fry it?" So there's a lack of balance. If I am what I eat, oh, I'm a cheeseburger and some French
me
fries.
too.
And yeah, but this is great. First of all, I'm loving the conversation, and what this is only the third episode, because I told you that this is episode 4, but number 3 got canceled. And what I'm finding is these conversations, even though I say we're not going to talk about anything, they just flow. How do you guys feel?
I like the free flow of it. I typically, I asked you, do you have an agenda? Because I'm a very agenda driven kind of person, but I typically will have an opinion on anything that's ever said. So having this free flow conversation is really good, and the perspective that other people bring to the table. While I may not comment on every single thing, not because I'm afraid to say anything, but because of time, and I want to make sure there's value in some of the things that are being said, so the audience that's actually watching this, they can make their decision.
Yeah, but don't hold back. And
I'm not holding back.
Okay, all right.
I just wait for trigger moments.
Okay, I'm tricking you now. Did you guys know about the Statue of Liberty?
What about it?
Why was the Statue of Liberty given to America?
I should know this. I know it was a gift from France.
It was a gift from France.
It was. It was originally copper, but it turned green. And I'm from New York, and I should know all of this, but I don't.
Do you know,
what
Chris?
it says at the bottom? Do you know what it says at the bottom?
It says, give me you're poor, you're tired, you're weak. I don't know the whole thing, but yeah, I get the idea of it.
All right. So do you know, Chris, why it was originally given?
I know that it was given to us from France as a gift of our liberty from England, or to celebrate our independence, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So
symbolizing the friendship between the two nations and the ideals of liberty and democracy.
Correct.
All right. So
and the French supported us very much in that war. We would not be a country without the French.
You're absolutely right, Chris. A lot of people don't know that. Everybody jokes about the French put their hands up, but they financially supported our war.
The French get the terrible end of the stick for so many reasons. And by the way, they were the ones who we liberated in Normandy, and if it wasn't for them standing up and having their network of individuals who the resistance during World War II, we might not have won World War II. So let's.
And then we turned our backs on them after the Revolutionary War, when they had their Revolutionary War. We were like,
we're about to turn our backs on them again.
So the point is, let's honor our allies in the French, because America wouldn't exist without France.
Absolutely.
I like to point out to people, right, one of the drafters of the Constitution, right, Thomas Jefferson. Guess where he was for a couple years before he came back to write that?
For a long time.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Mr. Franklin, my personal hero.
Yeah, he picked up a couple ideas from our French counterparts. Thought they were pretty good, and then wrote it into what we call the Constitution.
All right. So this is why we got the Statue of Liberty. And it's embarrassing because I'm at least 32 years old, and I just found this out. The Statue of Liberty was given to us by the French because of the abolishment of slavery. And originally, the Statue of Liberty came with broken chains, representing the shackles of the slaves.
Wow.
America refused to accept it because they said that the South would get upset. So they removed the chains, but the creator of it left the chains on the bottom of her feet. Because she's on a pedestal, you can't see the chains, but there are chains on the bottom of her feet. So if you Google it and say, Statue of Liberty, chains on feet, and I also did a whole when I learned about it, I did a whole little post. But the actual information is in the National Archives. And it's interesting because the history that we're taught is not always the history of reality. And it included bring us your free and your
Right.
all those things, but how she was originally depicted, and the reason why they originally gave it was a completely different story.
So do we thank or
That's the
blame
first time I
John
heard that.
Rockefeller for that?
Huh?
So do we thank or blame John Rockefeller for the state of education today?
You know, I don't know, but I do know this, that we have a very rich history in the United States, and it comes with its good and its bad, and we can embrace it and move on.
Yeah,
But
I think that
I don't think that we should hide it. I think understanding what's gone on and how far we've come gives certain groups a little bit more of a push. And you know, I don't blame Greg for slavery. I mean, it's not that. It's just part of our history that we should acknowledge and then move forward.
The other side of
Why
that
these
coin,
things are, huh?
so the other side of that coin, right, is someone that looks like me should acknowledge that other people that don't have had a different history, right, and ancestral history with that, and to at least understand that that existed and that people outside of my own direct orbit and sphere of influence may have had a different experience, a different journey, and may have different struggles that I'm not aware of. And so with that, right, the freedoms that we have, the rights that we are given through the documents we collectively created, those apply to everyone equally, whether we like it or not, whether we like them or not. They have the same equal rights, and they should have an equal opportunity and access to the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris?
I think we should all be given the equal opportunity to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And I think we could build a lot of companies that can do that if we do it the right way, if we do it the American way.
How do we, so have you ever seen the I don't know if it's a meme or a picture, but it's people at different heights trying to look over a fence, but they all have the same, I think they all have the same box. You've seen it, right, Dave?
I have seen it, and what they're doing is when you look at from the one side of the fence, it looks like they're all the same height, but when you look at the other side of the fence, they're on different pillars that are different height. So you have, somebody that's shorter, medium, and tall. And so what the idea of the comic that I get out of it is that everybody's equal until you look at the other side of things and see what they needed to lift them up to be at that same level.
Yeah. Thank you. Greg, can you keep the conversation going? I need to just go check on my dog real quick.
Sure.
I'll be 2 minutes and 2 seconds.
All right, you're on the clock.
Serious, hit a timer.
So, Chris, I have known a little bit longer. Dave, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Greg.
So, Bill and I created this podcast idea. We had been connected on LinkedIn for a bit of time, had some engagement back and forth on posts and maybe an audio. And so I personally enjoy connecting with new people that I meet and engage through LinkedIn, right? And having an introduction conversation, I enjoy that immensely. So we thought, well, instead of having just like a one-on-one like Zoom call or whatever, how about we just go live with it? So that's basically where the concept of this podcast came from. And then we wanted to be able to just have organic conversations about what people are currently talking about, either in real life with their family and friends, or in the workplace, or especially on social media, right? And so when Bill and I had decided to put this together, Bill made the comment that because of how I engage on social media, I'm pretty bold in how I express myself. And he said, oftentimes I verbalize the things that other people think but not express, right? Particularly, we were talking about discussing and having conversations with people on social media and coming to impasse and things like that. And I had mentioned to Chris one time, right? Like I wrestle with trolls online for sports, right? So but not for the reason people think, right? So I do enjoy having a debate style discussion with other people, particularly intellectuals, especially if they're an opposing viewpoint or opinion. I get to broaden my understanding, get to then see through the lens of someone else's vantage point, things like that. So I do enjoy a good technical and mechanical debate on a variety of topics. But most of the time, it's not above the belt, right? Very quickly, it devolves, it gets disrespectful, it gets rude, diverse.
By you or by them?
By them, like I will give people a couple of little checks to kind of redirect back to the subject that we're talking about. But once it like totally devolves to the point where it's just personal attacks, like that discussion's over. There's nothing else to be learned from that.
Yeah.
I think for me, if I could touch on that real quick, I love engaging conversations. I think everybody on this panel right now loves engaging conversations. That's why we're here. I will tell you that I'm very guarded, and I have to be, simply because I work for a global company, right? I deal with people in India, and Germany, and England, and other countries at times. And I have to be very aware of my online presence, right, wrong, or indifferent. I have to be aware of it, which is good because it keeps me at a level of respect.
Yes.
That doesn't cross that line, or shouldn't cross that line. I see people cross the line all the time, and I'm like, holy crap. And a lot of people feel this is my time. My beliefs are my beliefs. And part of me believes that's true. But when somebody looks at your profile, right away, they're going to associate you with the company that you're at.
Yes,
Chris, you own a company. I'm sure you feel this pain sometimes, based on, at least I'm assuming, being aware of some of the things that you say or some of your employees say, representing your company.
You see that a lot within the last couple of years, particularly people with extreme viewpoints, right, that are then being connected to their employer and then being called out on the same social media platforms. Their employers calling out, questioning like the values of the company and the culture that they foster there. So that's a great point. And I agree with you. Like I do engage in these conversations, and I try to be as respectful and transparent and true to the discussion, whatever the subject is. And then, like I mentioned, like once it just derails into personal attacks, that's the exit point.
Yeah, and when we started this, Greg, one of the things that you said was we can talk about anything as long as it's not hate speech. As long as we can speak about it in a way that helps each other understand the different view, without spewing hate. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So,
Chris, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say, but
I talked about your company and your employees.
oh yeah,
and
yeah. So yeah, one of the reasons that I don't have any employees yet. Well, I technically have two, but they haven't even filled out the I-9s yet. But long and the short, the reason I wanted to be able to, one of the reasons that I am forming this company, not just for all the variety of reasons that I stated earlier, which are all true, but as the CEO and founder, I'm allowed to say whatever I want, right? I can be the voice of the company. Nobody's going to fire me. So I get to come up here on LinkedIn and have no reservations about what I say because it's what I believe. And now there's no, at least in my company, free speech will be protected. So these discussions will be welcome in the workplace if they need to happen, because if they need to happen in a way where it is constructive to an organization, right? Where it helps with culture and helps create a company culture of understanding, then that's something I see as a positive, right? If it devolves, if it turns into something, then there's mechanisms, there's things you can institute within an organization to mitigate that. You could separate people physically. There are other things you could do. There's more remote work. Eventually, long and short of it is there's workarounds to problems like that when problems become too much within an organization. But if you're hiring the right people, same people who've got the same ethos, ethics, and you're all working towards the same company goals, it's going to be really hard to find difficult situations like that. Because if everybody's interested in working in a company goal, one of the other things I think is really important, especially at an organization like this, is to prioritize innovation, right? So I don't ever want to stagnate anybody who's in my company. If they come in and they want to like almost use part of their time as like an incubator space, do it. Go out there and be productive. Become an organization that we work with. I hope you're successful. Go leave the organization. That's the goal. Go become a new innovator somewhere else. Keep this growing. Keep this self-sustaining, all boats float approach going. Because even if my organization fails, if the idea continues and America grows, that's all I want to see happen. That and just be able to go to the beach and chill without my neighbors yelling at me over whose flag is on the front lawn.
What about your financial supporters or shareholders or whatever you got? I mean, do you feel like that your opinions on things can limit your financial stream?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are those people who haven't engaged with me in one-on-one discussion yet, who have obviously formed their opinions on me, but that's not what I was worried about in the first place. What I was worried about was getting to a point where enough people were paying attention, where I'd be able to be in a situation like this, where I'd be able to explain exactly what my vision is for the country, what my vision is for the world, and just say, this is a better way, guys. And, I get that I got here in a very brash, whatever way, but I saw the direction the world was going, and I had to press the accelerator on the algorithm. I had to weaponize it in order to get my idea out there, right? That's why I spent the money to go to MIT twice. It's why I sat there and I worked 18 or 16 to 18 hours a day. It's why my mother and father are barely talking to me right now and think I'm crazy. That, I put myself through hell to get to a point where I can get to a stage and just say, guys, there's a different alternative and it doesn't have to be this.
My feeling is not all money is good money. So if it means that I have to be someone else, or if it means that I have to not be able to be genuine or question my integrity.
Yeah.
I don't need it, So, Greg, I'm going to keep you out of this one. Chris and Dave, which one of you guys wants to answer Shantae's question?
What was the question?
Be brave. I'm not going to tell you what the question was.
All right. Well, I didn't. Maybe I didn't understand what you're asking. I didn't see what Shantae said, so I have no opinion on the comment.
So I'm going to put it up right now.
Okay, got it.
So which one of you guys wants to answer?
Rochambeau?
The rock, paper, scissors?
Let's do it.
No. Oh, you win.
All right. The problem with the bootstrap argument is that we don't all start at the same place, particularly when we talk about inequities historically against Black Americans. True. But as I shared earlier, while I'm not going to equate my experiences to large groups that have been isolated and personally attacked in our history, I've lived my own personal experiences to understand what racism, hatred, and other targeting issues. You know, if you weren't on earlier, Shantae, I kind of explained that I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I was brought up in a neighborhood that was predominantly another color than I am. I went to a high school where there was probably only 3 other white people, and I always dated outside of my race, and I was targeted for that. And so I got maybe just call it even a little glimpse of what other cultures have gone through, and probably it molded me into a way that made me realize that I had no room in my heart for racism. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm a huge advocate for love. I'm a huge advocate for dismantling any kind of hatred. So even as a Christian, when I hear organizations like the Westboro Baptist Church that say they hate fags and all, they don't represent me. And I'm disgusted that there's groups out there because it taints the value of my faith. And there's other groups that have their groups tainted by the few people that say some negative things, and we keep using this word weaponize. They weaponize their statements and their missions and say they're part of this group. I think it's disgusting.
I think that this is one of the best conversations, the openness that everyone is sharing, and the fact that we all come from different backgrounds and different opinions. It's great. Go ahead, Chris.
And just to piggyback on what you just said, I'm Irish. I'm Irish Italian. So I mean, Irish got sent to the front lines of the Civil War to be cannon fodder. Italians were, ghettos here in Jersey, and I heard the same thing growing up. I grew up in, white affluent, white picket fence, North Jersey. I grew up very isolated, very, I think we had 1 or 2 African American students in our entire high school. Maybe a couple of my good buddies were Hispanic. A couple of them were filmmakers, actors, and stuff like that. Currently on TV right now, doing some good work. So anyway, long and the short, I grew up I didn't really go into a different culture until I went to college, and I kind of realized some of the jargon I heard and what I thought were just normal words were just not normal words to be saying when you're out somewhere else. I went to college originally. I thought to play, football for Hofstra, but never ended up playing for them, and was in the athletic dorms, and all my roommates were African American, and that was just my how do you put it? Just my culture shock into the world was going to Hofstra. And my mother was upset when I dropped off there, and I was like, no, this is probably something I need. So I decided to stay there, and I learned a lot. There were gang wars going on in the streets. There was gunshots going off. I got mugged while I was out there, and people were concerned, but I was like, well, I didn't know this side of life existed. So this is honestly, for me, it was culturally enriching in a weird way, and I learned so much. I participated in rap battles to the best of my extent. I'm not going to say I tried.
Come on, spit some bars for us real quick.
I haven't. I did something about waffles and Eggos or something years back. I'm an embarrassment to that. But now, so long and the short, it was my baptism into it, and then my buddies all went to school in New York City, so I spent a lot of time in New York City. And so my views just rapidly changed as I began to have conversations like this in real life. I always say, one of my favorite things to do is observe behaviors in people that I find the best, and then try to model them in a certain way, to basically try to emulate the best of, I'll steal qualities from each one of you on this show, and it'll just become part of me. And that's it.
Greg and Bill, can I share one personal experience? I probably only have about 13 minutes left, but I want to kind of punctuate something, and it's going to be pretty deep, and so just kind of, it's going to be good though. It's a little bit of a testimony for me. So 3 years ago, I mentioned at the beginning of this call that I had a life experience where I lost my brother, my mother, my father, all within a year's period. They didn't all die at the same time, just in a span of the year they died. What I didn't share with you was that my brother was murdered, stabbed to death by 2 Black individuals. And so the reason I'm kind of emphasizing that is that I actually went, when they caught these individuals and we went to court and everything, we had to write a victim's letter, right? At the end, before the sentencing. And in my victim's letter, I brought into my faith that if they understood what they did, I would find it in my heart to forgive them. I'm in a forgiving state, even though they brutally murdered my brother. Multiple stab wounds. He didn't die easily. And so, I got to live with that and look at these people in the faith and in the face and go, someday I want to be able to forgive these people if they feel like they need to be redeemed. If they live with hate in their heart, well, then that's something they got to deal with God. But the only reason I'm sharing this is I never took that experience as a negative association with a group of people. They were just two
Right.
bad. They were just two bad people. That's it.
Right. I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, I'm dealing with it. I'm getting help and all this other stuff, but I don't talk about it a lot. But I think since we're on the subject, it speaks to you can't let a couple of bad eggs speak for a whole group.
Absolutely.
Right.
I just wanted to add a subtext to that and kind of underscore the illogical absurdity of it, right? Because there was parts of our country's history where Irish and Italians were demonized as immigrants, right? And we think about the country more or less was created by European immigrants, right? And now they're demonizing their own ancestry, right? So it's just illogical and absurd to have that kind of philosophy, that mentality, that mindset of disliking people just as a group and based on that reason.
So I didn't mean to drop something so heavy. I just
No,
it's
important.
Yeah, it's important because like I was considering dropping something heavy myself because it's in these moments where you actually have real conversations that people understand what you're coming from, why you do what you do and who you are. So it's like, to bring it back to like whatever for me, like this experience was, I started my journey because I got very sick in a hospital system and I saw what happens when healthcare fails, when apathy takes over, when we start serving this same system that we're currently in, what happens? It's not like doctors and nurses or whatever don't care about us. They're human beings too. Of course they care. But these systems that we have in place, these bureaucracies, which some of them do need some fixing, right? But we have some actual good ideas that can actually fix that without gutting the FDA, the CDC, the NIH, and all the stuff that actually prevents diseases, the stuff that stops COVID from happening, so we don't have to go around sheltered in place again, so we can keep logistics and supply chains open, so we can actually keep the world's economy going. We don't want to defund that stuff because we will be isolated and covered in disease very quickly. And guess who's not going to help us is our really angry European friends. And who is going to take advantage of that are the people who are the authoritarian nations of the world that have been trying very hard to get America off of its pedestal for quite some time, right? So if you really want to keep this country great, let's make sure to pay attention to who's trying to knock us down and why right now.
And separate us. Divide and conquer.
Yep. So, Dave, you said you have maybe 8 more minutes.
Exactly, sir.
Let's go ahead. Final thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. Will, I'm sorry, I call you Bill. You've always been an engaging partner on LinkedIn. And you said it best yourself. We may not always agree, but that I think is what helps spawn this kind of format, which I actually love. Keep up the good work. I'll be watching, the next one you have. I'll see what other guests you have, and I really appreciate it. Chris, it was very nice meeting you. Greg, again, same thing. I definitely plan on sending out, if you're interested, some linked-out invites. I'd like to continue watching what you're doing, Chris. Whatever you're doing sounds extremely fascinating to me. Yeah, definitely going to be following that. And I just
hey, if you're in touch and you're global and you can help get it set up, just link with me and let's start talking.
Yeah. I'll see what I can do. It's funny you should say, and I'll end with this. Because of my, so I used to be a mega introvert, which means I'm not shy. I just can only tolerate people in certain doses. But I found myself since the event with my brother and my mother, I've kind of taken a different view on life and realized that people matter. I've always known people matter, but just the connections matter to me. And so I want to make sure I don't spread myself too thin, but I'm involved in so much. I'm helping a friend rewrite a book. I'm doing some scientific stuff with some other friends. And it just seems like I'm all over the place, which is good. But I also have to be consciousness of my mental health, how much I spread myself out as well. So I definitely want to connect. If I can ever be of any value to any one of you, I would love to do it. But, you know, we all have to remember that sometimes we can put ourselves in a position where we overdo what we feel like we should be doing because we feel the need for that engagement with people.
I'm sure there's somebody who's listening who's salivating at the chance to have the conversation in your stead. So hopefully that's the result anyway. Either way, let's connect. I'm sure you've got some connections that we can help out. And like I said, I'm all boats float. So let's figure out a way to work together either way. So
Cool.
Chris, final thoughts?
My final thoughts are I absolutely love this country, and I love this country for a variety of reasons. And it's not reflected in what I'm currently seeing. So I would just like to take a good hard look at what the Constitution said, what the framers had in mind, update it for a couple of things that we got wrong about maybe 3/5 of a person, maybe revisit some gerrymandering and redlining, and to have a civil conversation as Americans like this and just say what's fair, what's not, and how can we fix it going forward? Because one thing AI does give us that everybody's so terrified of is, like, you know, we were talking earlier about old age and how to take care of the elderly. We can build some pretty cool robots that can take care of people. We know how to do that, and we can really make life on Earth a very pleasurable, meaningful experience for all, and take care of all. It's possible if we just shift our mindset.
Yep. With that said, with AI taking away all the jobs, we need to figure out how to support ourselves.
Correct.
Greg.
So we can reskill and upskill.
Right. That's we need to figure it out. Greg, final thoughts?
Again, pleasure to have this conversation with everyone. Dave, again, nice to meet you. Let's definitely connect after this conversation. I think we talked about a lot of important things today. And to everyone's point, right, we have more in common than we don't. Right, there are lessons to be learned from mistakes from the past, but also, like, there are things that we are doing right, you know, individually, as a community, and as a nation. And with a few tweaks here and there, and enough people on the same page, singing from the same sheet of music, right, we can make some pretty glorious music together.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Do you want to talk about, I think that you have something lined up for next week. Is that right?
I can't talk about it right now.
Okay. All right. That's fine. I want to thank everyone for joining. This is the type of conversations that I want to have. I think it brings us closer together and helps us understand where that we are family, like we are a community, we are neighbors. And, you know, I appreciate the fact that nobody shied away from the hard questions. Dave, I loved your answer to Shantae's question, not knowing what it was going to be. And I just want to keep the conversation going. I also want to shout out Kenneth Dunner, because he has been a real champion for this show. And also, I probably will be hearing Chris at Keith Keller's later. Is that correct, Keith? I'm Chris.
We'll see. It depends on if I'm invited to the show or not. I'll find out. I usually get a DM shortly before or after, or shortly before the show, about an hour or so. If he invites me, I'll be there. If not, I will be cheering him on in the audience.
There you go. All right.
Just real quick, when we talk about connectors, like Kenneth Dunner, he's a great connector.
He really is.
He's very supportive. Yes. So shout out to Ken. Thank you for
Kenny is a close personal friend of mine. I talk to him on the phone every night. If it wasn't for him, none of this would be possible. So thank that gentleman for putting. He's literally the reason we're all on stage.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, did you want to have a call after this? to yell at me?
We can talk offline, sure, if you want.
Yeah, let's do that. And then the other thing is, I wanted to let Greg know that I find it hilarious for me to put out all of these announcements about UBU Live with all of my face all over it. And I was waiting for you to get mad and say, "Will you stop doing this?" But you didn't. It's a really good looking AI version of me.
Do you want me to start getting mad about it?
It did. So I don't know. Anyway, I'll give you a call right now. I'm going to
Okay.
let you guys go. I appreciate all of you guys. It's been great. And I hope the audience enjoyed what they heard today and learned something.
Amen.
All right.
Take care, brother.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, guys.
This is a pleasure, everyone. Thank you.
I don't know how to end the stream. Hold on. There you go.